I never expected my life to change because of a birdhouse. But that's exactly what happened the spring I turned 28, living in that cramped studio apartment on Maple Street, where the only view I had was of the brick wall of the building next door and a narrow slice of sky. I'd moved in 6 months earlier, after my breakup with Daniel. That relationship had ended the way most of mine did, with me apologizing for being too much or not enough. I could never quite figure out which. The apartment was all I could afford on my graphic designer salary, and honestly, I didn't care much about where I lived back then. I was just existing, going through the motions. Wake up, work, eat something forgettable, sleep, repeat. The apartment next door had been empty since I moved in. I'd see the landlord showing it occasionally, but no one ever took it. Can't say I blamed them. These units were basically glorified shoeboxes with outdated fixtures and radiators that clanked like angry ghosts at 3 in the morning. Then, one Saturday in early March, I heard sounds through the wall. Moving sounds. Furniture scraping, boxes dropping, someone swearing softly. I remember thinking, great, there goes my peaceful Saturday. I was working on a logo design for a coffee roaster, and I'd hoped to have the whole weekend to myself. I didn't see him until the following Tuesday evening. I was coming home from the corner store with a bag of groceries, mostly instant ramen and frozen dinners, when I nearly collided with someone on the stairs. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark curly hair that looked like it had given up trying to be manageable. He wore paint-stained jeans and a faded blue Henley that had seen better days. "Sorry," we both said simultaneously, then laughed awkwardly. "You must be my neighbor," he said, and his voice had this quality to it, warm and a little rough around the edges, like honey mixed with gravel. "I'm Cassian. Just moved in next door." "Elliot," I managed, suddenly very aware that I was holding a bag full of sad bachelor food. "Welcome to the building." His eyes were this unusual shade of green, like sea glass, and when he smiled, really smiled, tiny lines appeared at the corners. I guessed he was around my age, maybe a year or two older. There was something about him that felt immediately comfortable, like running into an old friend you'd somehow never met before. "Thanks," he said. "Fair warning, I'm a morning person. I might make some noise early on. I'm a carpenter, so I'm usually up before sunrise." "I'm a night owl," I replied, "so we probably won't even notice each other." I was wrong about that. So completely wrong. The next morning, I woke up to sounds I couldn't quite identify. Not loud, just present. Measuring, tapping, the soft scrape of sandpaper. It was barely 7, which for me was the middle of the night, but somehow the sounds weren't annoying. They were almost rhythmic, meditative. I lay in bed listening, wondering what he was building. Over the next few weeks, I became hyper-aware of Cassian's presence next door. I'd hear him leave before dawn, his footsteps deliberate and quiet, like he was trying not to wake anyone. I'd hear him return in the evenings, sometimes early, sometimes late. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses of him in the hallway or on the stairs. We'd exchange small talk, the kind neighbors do, about the weather or the broken washing machine in the basement, or the landlord's promises to fix the front door that never locked properly. I found myself listening for him without meaning to. His apartment shared a wall with my bedroom, and I could hear the soft sounds of his life through the plaster and brick. Music sometimes, classic rock mostly, played low. The shower running. Once I heard him on the phone with someone, his voice muffled, but the tone unmistakably frustrated, then sad. I felt guilty for overhearing, but I couldn't help wondering what had put that sadness in his voice. April arrived with unexpected warmth, and that's when everything shifted. I was sitting by my window one Saturday morning. Oh, the one window in my whole apartment, drinking coffee and trying to find inspiration for a website redesign that was due Monday. The window looked out onto that narrow gap between buildings, barely 3 feet wide, where nothing grew and sunlight only penetrated for about 20 minutes a day. I heard his window open, the one that must have been directly across from mine. I glanced over and there he was, Cassian, leaning out slightly, looking at the dismal space between our buildings with an expression of intense concentration. He had a tape measure in his hand. He caught me looking and waved. "Morning, Elliot." "Weird question, but do you ever get birds here, in this gap?" I shrugged. Pigeons sometimes. Why? Just thinking, he said, that smile playing at his lips again. This space is sad. It needs something. Then he disappeared back inside, and I thought that was the end of it. But Cassian, I would learn, was someone who turned thoughts into action. The next weekend, I woke to sounds outside my window. I pulled back the curtain and there he was, leaning out his window with what looked like a wooden structure in his hands. It took me a moment to realize what it was. A birdhouse. But not just any birdhouse. This was a work of art. He'd crafted it from what looked like reclaimed wood, different shades and textures pieced together like a puzzle. The roof was shingled with thin cedar pieces, and the whole thing had this rustic, storybook quality. But what caught my attention was the door. Most birdhouses have a small circular entrance, just big enough for a bird to squeeze through. This one had an arched doorway, wide and welcoming, definitely big enough for two birds to enter side by side. Cassian was attaching it to a bracket he must have installed earlier, positioning it right in the middle of that gap between our windows. He worked with complete focus, his movements careful and precise. When he finished, he sat back and looked at it, then glanced over at my window. I opened it. The spring air rushed in, still cool, but carrying hints of warmth to come. "What do you think?" he asked. "It's beautiful," I said, and I meant it. "You made that?" "Yeah, figured we both deserve a better view. And who knows, maybe we'll get some tenants." "The door," I said. "It's bigger than usual." He looked at the birdhouse, then back at me, and something in his expression shifted, became softer. "I don't know. I just thought, why should they have to go in one at a time? Seems lonely." That birdhouse became the focal point of my days. I'd find myself glancing at it constantly, watching for birds, but also just appreciating it as an object. Cassian had carved tiny details into the wood, little flourishes that you could only see if you really looked. A vine pattern along one side, what might have been stars or flowers dotting the roof. A week later, we got our first visitors. A pair of house sparrows, the male with his black bib and gray cap, the female more subtle in her brown plumage. They were cautious at first, landing on the nearby windowsill, checking out this new structure. Then the male hopped closer, peered into that generous doorway, and disappeared inside. The female followed immediately after, both of them fitting through together easily. I texted Cassian without thinking. I'd gotten his number after he'd helped me carry groceries up the stairs one evening when my bag had split. "We have birds!" 3 dots appeared immediately. "I know, I've been watching. They seem to like it." "You did a good thing," I typed back. "We'll see if they stay." They did stay. Over the next weeks, I watched those sparrows build a nest inside, both of them working together, carrying in bits of grass and string and whatever else they could find. I'd never paid much attention to birds before, but there was something mesmerizing about their partnership, the way they moved around each other with such practiced ease, communicating in chirps and movements. I started noticing Cassian more too, in ways that had nothing to do with being neighborly. The way his hair curled at the nape of his neck, how his hands moved when he talked, always gesturing, shaping invisible things in the air. The concentrated expression he got when he was thinking about something. I'd catch myself looking for him, timing my comings and goings to coincide with his, even though I told myself I wasn't. One evening in early May, I was out on the fire escape, which was less of a fire escape and more of a rusty metal platform barely big enough for one person. I'd brought a beer and my sketchbook, trying to capture the way the evening light hit the birdhouse. The sparrows were inside, settling in for the night, and I could hear their soft chirping. "Mind if I join you?" I looked up. Cassian was leaning out his window, which opened onto the same fire escape. "It's technically a fire hazard to have 2 people out here," I said. But I won't tell if you won't." He climbed out carefully, and the metal groaned but held. We sat side by side, our shoulders nearly touching, legs dangling over the edge. He had a beer too, and we sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from blue to pink to purple. "Can I see?" he asked, nodding at my sketchbook. I hesitated, then handed it over. He studied my drawing of the birdhouse, and I watched his face, trying to gauge his reaction. He smiled, that genuine smile that made his whole face light up. You made it look better than it is, he said. I drew what I see. He handed the sketchbook back, and our fingers brushed. It was brief, accidental, but I felt it like an electric current. I like how you see things, he said quietly. We started spending more time together after that. It happened gradually and naturally. He'd knock on my door with leftover pizza because he'd ordered too much. I'd invite him over to watch a movie because my TV was bigger than his. We'd end up on the fire escape together more evenings than not, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in Vermont, about learning carpentry from his grandfather, about moving to the city to escape a relationship that had slowly suffocated him. I told him about my family, about being the only gay son in a household that didn't quite know what to do with that information, about Daniel and the pattern of relationships where I always seemed to be apologizing for existing. You know what I think? Cassian said one night, after I'd finished explaining why my last relationship had failed. I think you've been trying to fit through doors that were too small. Like you were making yourself smaller to squeeze through when what you needed was someone who'd build you a bigger door. I looked at the birdhouse hanging there between our windows and felt something shift in my chest. The sparrows had eggs. We discovered this when the female stopped leaving the nest and the male became a devoted provider, constantly flying in and out with food. Cassian started leaving birdseed on his windowsill, and I did the same. We'd text each other updates like proud parents. He just brought her a huge bug. She looked thrilled. I think I heard cheeping. Baby bird soon? June arrived with summer heat, and my apartment became almost unbearable. No air conditioning, just a sad box fan that pushed hot air around. I'd taken to working in just shorts, my laptop balanced on my knees, trying not to move too much. Cassian knocked one particularly brutal afternoon. I'm installing a window AC unit, he said. Want to come over where it's cool? You look like you're melting. His apartment was identical to mine in layout, but completely different in feel. He'd built things, shelves and a small table, a headboard for his bed. Everything was wood, warm and handcrafted, books everywhere, plants on every surface. It felt like a home. We sat on his couch, which was nicer than mine, drinking iced tea and watching terrible reality TV. The AC hummed efficiently, and I felt my body temperature slowly return to normal. At some point, I dozed off, my head dropping onto his shoulder. When I woke up, he hadn't moved, and his arm was around me, casual and comfortable. Sorry, I mumbled, sitting up. Don't be, he said, and his voice had that quality again, the warm honey and gravel. You can stay if you want. It's too hot in your place. I stayed. We ordered Thai food and ate it sitting on his floor, the boxes spread between us. We talked about our dreams, the things we wanted to do. He wanted to open his own furniture shop someday, create custom pieces. I wanted to do more illustration, less corporate design work. The conversation flowed like it always did with him, easy and natural, until the sky outside turned dark, and I realized I should probably go. Or, he said, and then stopped. Or what? Or you could stay here tonight? I mean, platonically. The couch pulls out. It's just, your apartment's going to be miserable, and I have AC. I knew I should say no. I knew this was dangerous territory, this feeling that had been growing in my chest every time I looked at him. But I said yes anyway. The couch was comfortable. He brought me a pillow and a light blanket, said goodnight, and disappeared into his bedroom. I lay there in the dark, listening to the AC and the distant sounds of the city, and I couldn't sleep, because all I could think about was that he was right there, just through that door, and I wanted to be closer. Around 2 a.m, I heard his door open. Footsteps, then his voice, soft in the darkness. Elliot, you awake? Yeah, I can't sleep. Want some company? He sat on the floor next to the pull-out couch, his back against it. I shifted so I was sitting too, and we stayed like that, in the dark, not touching but close. I need to tell you something, he said finally. And I'm terrified to say it, because I don't want to lose this, whatever this friendship is, but I also can't keep pretending. My heart was racing. Pretending what? That I don't feel more, that I haven't been feeling more for weeks now, maybe since the beginning. He turned to look at me, and even in the darkness, I could see his eyes. I built that birdhouse for you, Elliot. I mean, yes, for the birds, but really for you. Because you mentioned once that your view was depressing, and I wanted to give you something beautiful to look at. And I made the door big enough for two because I kept thinking about what you'd said, about always feeling like you had to make yourself smaller, and I just thought, what if you didn't have to? What if there was room for all of you? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel this overwhelming wave of emotion, hope and fear and want all mixed together. Say something, he whispered. Please. Instead of speaking, I reached for him. My hand found his face in the darkness, and I kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, a question. He answered by pulling me closer, and then we were both on the pull-out bed, tangled together, kissing like we were making up for all those weeks of wanting and not saying. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine. I was so scared you didn't feel the same. Are you kidding? I've been falling for you since you installed that birdhouse, maybe before. Probably before. We spent that night together, not sleeping, just talking and touching and discovering each other. He traced the lines of my body like he was memorizing them, and I learned the taste of his skin, the sounds he made, the way he said my name like it was something precious. The baby birds hatched in mid-June. We heard them first, their tiny, desperate cheeping, then saw the parents working overtime, both flying in and out constantly with food. Cassian and I would watch from his window or mine, our fingers intertwined, marveling at this small miracle happening right outside. Look at them, I said one morning, watching both parent birds squeeze into that doorway together, their beaks full. Working as a team, best design decision I ever made, Cassian said, kissing my temple. That door. We fell into a rhythm, him and me. Some nights I stayed at his place, some nights he stayed at mine. We'd cook together, terrible attempts at recipes we found online. We'd work side by side, him sketching furniture designs while I worked on my illustrations. Boom, we'd end up on the fire escape most evenings, watching the birds, watching the sky, just being together. My friends noticed the change in me. You're different, my best friend Maya said when we met for coffee. Happy different. What happened? I met someone, I said, and couldn't stop smiling. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about Cassian, about the birdhouse, about how he looked at me like I was someone worth seeing, about how for the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't have to shrink myself to fit. He sounds perfect, she said. He's not perfect, but he's perfect for me. The baby birds fledged in early July. We watched them take their first flights, clumsy and brave, their parents calling encouragement. They'd land on the fire escape, on the windowsills, testing their wings. Within a week, they were gone, off to start their own lives. The birdhouse sat empty for a while after that. Cassian and I talked about taking it down, but neither of us could bear to. It had become part of our story, this wooden structure hanging in the space between our windows. One August evening, we were both in his apartment, cooking dinner together. He was chopping vegetables, and I was attempting to make pasta from scratch, which was going about as well as expected. Flour everywhere. His kitchen was a disaster. Move in with me, he said suddenly. I looked up from the dough I was murdering. What? Move in with me, or I'll move in with you, or we'll find a new place together. I don't care which. I just want to stop pretending we live separately when we're together every night anyway. We've only been together for 2 months. I know. And if you think it's too soon, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need. But Elliot, I'm sure about this. About you. About us. I looked at him, really looked at him, at this man who had built me a birdhouse with a door big enough for two, who had seen me, really seen me, and hadn't asked me to be smaller or different or less, who had made space for all of me. Yes, I said, let's find a new place, together. We found an apartment in September, a one-bedroom with actual space and windows that let in real light. We brought the birdhouse with us, installed it outside our bedroom window. New birds found it almost immediately, a pair of chickadees this time, bold and chatty. I'm writing this now from our living room, watching Cassian work on a commission piece, a custom table for a client. He's completely focused. his hands moving with practiced skill, shaping wood into something beautiful. In a few minutes, I'll get up and make us coffee, and he'll take a break, and we'll sit together on the couch he built, the one that's exactly the right size for two. The birdhouse is still outside our window. Sometimes it's empty, sometimes it's full, but the door is always there, wide and welcoming, big enough for two to enter side by side. A reminder that the best things in life don't require us to make ourselves smaller. They make space for us to be whole. I never expected my life to change because of a birdhouse, but I'm grateful every day that it did. That Cassian saw that sad gap between our windows and decided to put something beautiful there. That he carved a door big enough for two, even before he knew who might need it. Sometimes the smallest gestures contain the biggest truths. Sometimes home isn't a place, but a person who builds you a door you can walk through without bending.